I want you to be honest with yourself and for everyone for a minute. Do you really think I'm afraid to debate you? For real?
You guys?
No, Ryan, you goof. You think that I seriously was afraid to debate you, that you prepped hard this one time. That's your honest to goodness opinion of what happened there.
Well, he did
No.
prep. I did prep.
You know,
oh, no, I believe you
did a lot of prep.
I believe you prepped. You said, I saw it. Someone sent me the clip of you on Dusty's channel, that your feeling is that I saw that you did prep and was looking for an out.
I think there is something to that, but I don't think it's the main reason you left.
I mean, come on. Do you really think? I hope you prepped. I love debating people. I love debating people that are fucking beating me around on topics. With you, it'll never happen for two reasons. One, because you're not capable, and second, because you're not going to get the chance. But you know, neither here nor there.
Which section of the Insurrection Act do you want Trump to invoke?
What was 252? The one I read in my opening statement? Remember?
So 253 probably. Then
I can't remember the specific one I read in my opening statement. Doesn't matter. Your partner already conceded that legally it can be invoked. So the legality of it's not important. What matters is the morality of it or the practicality of it, which, yes, I think the fact that we see violence against federal officers means that the police there are unwilling or incapable of defending the federal officers, that absolutely we should send in people from the National Guard to protect them. Once you concede the legality, what's it matter what section I want to invoke?
Well,
now the only
legality is,
okay.
I'd say the legality of it is kind of disputable because it's not something that is that can't be reviewed by the courts, right? So like even if Trump does it, the circumstances by which, like the standard by which he's invoking it, still can be reviewed.
Well, sure, they can. But it doesn't matter. Your partner conceded the legality of it. You could have disagreed, but for the purposes of me in that point where we left off in the debate, your side had conceded the legality. I still think, in fact, there was a ruling today, which was the point you were interrupting me on when I got frustrated. There was a ruling today that stayed the court's order that said that Trump couldn't send him, and now we have National Guard troops on their way to Portland. As I told you would be the case. It's clear cut that they're going to win that legal case, that he has the right to do this.
But not to, like, National Guard's not going there to enforce local laws, right?
Well, I believe they're going there to protect, right, the federal troops. And part of that could be the enforcement of local laws if the people are breaking the laws in ways that don't directly attack federal troops, but are setting up things that would be dangerous for people that are supporting ICE or for the transportation and the entrance exit into ICE facilities. For example, if they decide to blockade a street, you would say, well, that's not National Guard's job to arrest them, but it is if they think that it's going to be an incoming second-degree threat to the people that are there to enforce the federal law, ICE. So, and the other thing is, I would have asked you, right? You said, well, when this was last invoked, like Rodney King, am I right? It's the last time it was invoked, right?
92. Yep.
You said that it resulted in a bunch of deaths, correct? Or a bunch of bad shit.
Before it was invoked. Before it was invoked, there were 50 plus people had been killed. There were unalive. Sorry. There were 1,000 people who had been injured, 1,000 buildings had been burned, and the police were literally incapable of executing the laws.
Okay,
so that was a very particular circumstance. It clearly isn't going on right now. Right?
So I misunderstood, but if you would have said that, I would say great. Then after it was invoked, did the damage continue, or was it precipitously declined?
I imagine that it was fairly quickly controlled.
So then, what was the harm?
Exact timeline.
What was the harm of sending those troops in?
I'm not saying there was harm in 92.
Okay,
right?
so then
I'm not arguing whether or not it was justified to invoke it in 92.
Okay, so then the question would be, you don't really have a reason that practically, or it would be bad, that it would make the situation worse. You're just making a legal claim, which to me, it seemed like your opponent had already conceded, which you'll admit, he conceded the legal argument.
So I'm making two parts, right?
Okay.
I think legally it's dubious, to say the least. I don't think most of the conditions. I think a lot of legal scholars view 253 as being in context of 252. A lot of people have been critical of how it's of the vagary of it. In fact, something we would have gotten into if we were debating longer is that 253, if read, or just 253 section 2 specifically, would be if read just on its face, would allow basically the president to invoke the Insurrection Act to send the military to even like 2 people conspired to break federal law, which I think even you would acknowledge is kind of a ridiculous bar.
Well, I mean, it depends. Now, here's the problem, right? You would imply that the Insurrection Act could be used to quell insurrections, correct?
Sure, but that's kind of
how did they argue? How did most lefties argue what the definition of insurrection was?
I mean, I agree with the Colorado Supreme Court or whatever with the insurrection, the way they characterize it. I think it's a reasonable standard.
How did they characterize?
But I don't know if that's the same. Yeah, you're saying an assemblage of people who's trying to block federal procedure from being carried out. But I don't think the Insurrection Act is just like if there's an insurrection in any way. I like when you like what you say in all of these debates that you've had about the insurrections, or the January 6th insurrection in particular, is that basically you're saying that it waters down the term, right?
Correct.
So
yes.
Are you using the watered down you perceive
yes.
as a watered down version to invoke the insurrection?
I am invoking the standard that has been set forth by the Democratic Party. That's what I'm invoking. The standard that said Trump saying fight like hell was engaging in an insurrection. That's they've won the argument as far as I'm concerned. So now that they want to attack federal ICE with impunity, absolutely we should invoke the Insurrection Act to protect our federal agents that local police are unwilling to. And we have specific examples. We have in Illinois specifically 2 examples that I could think of. One, we have a stand down order, it seems, from police in protecting ICE agents as they were being rammed into with a lethal vehicle. That's number one. Second, we have orders from the governor.
Can we start with one?
Sure.
Can we start with the first
sure.
one? So the one you're talking about is where there was the armed woman, right? The allegedly
Correct.
armed woman?
But there were 2 incidents that day, allegedly. But yes, that was one of them.
So you recognize that particular incident? There's a lot of dispute about the nature, like the police, apparently police audio and witnesses dispute the official narrative of that event.
Well, the audio seemed to not dispute it. I think that they have since post hoc said, wait a minute, there were time delays and shit like that with the audio, correct?
I'm not 100% sure. I read it like shortly after it all happened.
Right.
So there may have been updates that I'm not privy to, but my understanding is that there was disputes about like even potentially who even hit who.
Right. Well, I think that it's clear to see that if there is a call going out, that there is someone who is armed and there's a claim that law enforcement is claiming they are ramming into us and surrounding us, that local law enforcement should respond. Would you not agree with that?
Well, it's very interesting you point out that she was armed because are you aware that her firearm never left her purse?
So how'd
they even know she was armed until later?
I guess let's put it this way. We found out post hoc she was armed. So I guess the armed.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Nonetheless, if I'm imagine this. Imagine that I'm sitting here and I'm from the my county's police department, and I'm on duty in my cruiser, and I hear the state police say, "We're being rammed into. Someone send help." And I'm like, I don't know who's ramming who.
I don't think that's what happened, right? I don't think that's what happened.
My understanding. Go ahead, Trippy.
Brian.
This person got shot and went to the hospital. Sorry, Trippy. Go ahead. Yeah.
When we were on Sarah's podcast and you were sitting there with who was the other guy that was arguing that when January 6th went down and that woman got shot in the neck, it was like, the biggest deal about that was her having a knife in her pocket. Like you guys are going to say that her having a knife in her pocket.
I wasn't that was Latavian stuff. But I mean, I was saying that like what she was doing, she was breaking into basically there was a very thin area between her and the Congress people, and she was breaking in. Would have been the first one through that window, and obviously there would have been a lot more people piling through if she hadn't been stopped. For better or for worse.
Latavian brings up the knife, and you didn't have any argument against that. But now you're saying that the gun never left this woman's belongings, never left her purse, and they just shouldn't have shot her.
This is what we got.
I didn't say they shouldn't have shot her.
Now, granted, Ryan, I know you know this, right? I just searched this, right, using AI, right? But it does have what it claims to be audio. So take this with a grain of salt, and I'll later look into my audience to make sure this is correct. But it says audio evidence suggests Chicago Police Department computer-aided dispatch, also known as CAD, message that explicitly instructed officers not to respond to the incident, effectively ordering a stand down. This occurred amid tensions between federal agents and Chicago's sanctuary city policies under Mayor Brandon Johnson's and Government Pritzker. Details of the audio log. The CAD message, time-stamped around 12:34 on October 4th, 2025, was sent by Chicago Police Department's Chief of Patrol and stated, quote, "Please, Chief of Patrol, no units will respond to this as related from October 4th, 2025, 12:34. Caller is one of approximately 30 armed patrol agents ICE who are being surrounded by a large crowd of people requesting CPD. This was reviewed by Fox News and other outlets, confirming it directed officers to ignore calls for assistance from the 30-plus federal agents who reported being trapped under threat. CPD sources described this as a deliberate non-response, accusing the department leaders of misleading the public by later claiming officers were only there for traffic control." Your response?
What was their justification for refusing?
They said
I mean,
that they were
like-
only there for traffic control and not to respond to things like that.
Wait, what do you mean? They were only there for? You're saying that's what the police
Right.
department
So
said?
insiders within the Chicago Police Department said, hey, we think we were told this because of the mayor and because their official response seemed to be like, no, our officers were only there to direct traffic, not to respond to things like that.
I mean, that may be true. Maybe that's. I don't.
I mean,
know
you
what
don't see the problem with
like,
that?
The legal standard is for their interaction there.
Okay, well then,
It
nonetheless,
depends. I mean,
would you
again,
say-
I don't know what there might be. Hang on, there might. Can I just say, there might be laws or other conditions that might make it the appropriate thing to do. I don't know the.
let's assume
Like,
that's true.
You're so certain that there's nothing that like it's all just bad faith. Like they're just trying to stop ICE from being able to. They're refusing to protect ICE because they just like hate Trump.
Yes, when there are insiders within the Chicago Police Department, and reasonability tells us when their mayor and the governor are both going in this direction, that influenced their decision. It is beyond the pale to think that one law enforcement agency wouldn't respond to another agency putting out a call for help because they were being surrounded by vehicles that were ramming them. But let's assume you're right. Let's assume that for whatever reason, whether it be the way the law is written in Chicago or a lack of police presence, etc., that there weren't resources or there weren't allowed to be resources to respond to this. Is that fair? That's the point you're making?
I'm just saying I don't know. I'm saying I'm open to that being the case, and it doesn't seem like you are, and it seems like you don't know either.
Okay, but if it's not as I'm saying, then the only logical explanation would be either they're incapable of responding because they lacked resources, or there's some sort of law that doesn't allow them to respond. Can you think of any other reason why they wouldn't have responded?
I'm saying I'm agnostic to it. I just don't know why they didn't
Okay,
respond.
so
I don't know
I've
why they.
outlined-
Regardless, you're putting out some ideas of how it could, and I'm not pretending that I know I'm not saying that either of yours is wrong, or that yours are the only options. I'm suspicious those are I don't know. I'm just saying I'm agnostic because I don't know why the CP did this. The only reason that what I'm pushing back on is you seem to be asserting that the reason, and you seem to be very confident in this, is because they want to interrupt ICE, so they want to refuse to protect ICE. I'm skeptical of that.
I've cited what is most logical. I've also cited what people within Chicago Police Department have assumed. However, what I'm also doing is saying, let me play devil's advocate and say the other side of it. The other side is they were justified not responding for one of two reasons. One, because there were certain laws on the book that meant that they couldn't respond. They were only allowed to do traffic. Two, they didn't have the resources to respond. I'm asking you, can you think of any other justified reasons? You seem to be unwilling or incapable of giving any of the reasons. So
what I'm reading right now. Well,
go ahead.
Okay, yeah, fine. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say right now I'm reading CPD showed up for the crash and crowd safety, but stayed out of the federal immigration operation, consistent with jurisdiction and local state policy and ongoing legal scrutiny of federal tactics.
That's who made that statement? Like
from CBS News.
Okay, let me again say that the message said this is not in dispute as far as I know, unless you have something to show. The actual transcript of the message says, quote, "Please, Chief of Patrol, no units will respond to this as related to October 4th, 2025, 1234. Caller is one of approximately 30 armed patrol agents who are being surrounded by a large crowd of people requesting Chicago Police Department." In other words, the request wasn't come help us enforce immigration law. It was we are being surrounded and we're requesting local police backup. So when they come out afterward, and when people within the Chicago Police Department say, we think we were told to stand down for political reasons, them releasing a statement to CBS later saying, oh, no, we responded. We just didn't help enforce immigration. That's not what this message says. This message says don't respond.
Well, actually, it doesn't say that. It says no units will. The phrasing there's a little weird, right? It could be like they just hadn't gotten a response from anybody at the moment. Isn't that?
It says no units will respond.
Yeah, exactly. As in they haven't responded.
No.
Or you could say they won't. Like you can read that in two different ways. You acknowledge that, right?
No.
No?
If they wanted to say they hadn't responded, it would say no units have responded, not no units will. Will is a statement of from present to future. I will do this. That means in the future, I will do this. I haven't done this means I haven't done it in the past. You understand the difference?
I could see it go either way, but again, also like, do you dispute that like people that CPD did show up
eventually, right? But it could have been too late if people would have been killed, right? But eventually they did show up. Now the point I'm trying to make is even if they had good reason not to show up for the reasons I said, wouldn't that be more justification to get the National Guard there if Chicago police is unwilling or unable to aid ICE? I think so.
I mean, potentially, if they are actually refusing to enforce certain laws, but it just doesn't sound like that's the case here.
It sounds like that was the case there. The second
because
argument,
again, it sounds like CPD actually did send people out there. It sounds like they did go. They did handle the crash situation. They just didn't engage in criminal and immigration.
I don't think it could be more clear based on the statement. I think that after the situation had calmed down, that they showed up when they were no longer needed is irrelevant. What matters is in the moment when the ICE agents thought that they were in jeopardy and they were surrounded, and they didn't show up then, and they were ordered to stand down. That's what the message shows. The other point that I want to make is we also have basically orders from the governor, straight from the governor's office, that says that ICE will not be allowed to go into places of judiciary in order to enforce the law. That is another bullshit law that suggests that they are actively engaging or protecting people from the law legally being enforced from federal authorities. Another reason to invoke the Insurrection Act.
But he's allowed to do that, right? Legally.
Who?
The governor.
I don't know. We'll see. But I bet that the courts will also. I'm almost positive that Trump's allowed to invoke the Insurrection Act as well. So,
yeah, potentially, and then both can be reviewed. And when they go to the Supreme Court, we might find out differently. But right now, this is the point we were getting on before the stream ended. Right, is that there's not federal court orders demanding that he not do that. Right,
demanding that Pritzker. That's what demanding the governor does. Exactly. I do not believe that there's been a federal court order demanding. I think that he will be allowed to do that, but the counter would be that Trump would be allowed to invoke the Insurrection Act, overriding that. Then, nonetheless, the question, like,
when there might be other circumstances, right? Like when we talk about the Insurrection Act, again, a lot of people, a lot of legal scholars from both sides of the aisle as well, suggest that 253 should be considered in context of 252 because of the vagueness of the claim. But you're saying because it's been watered down by the left, you just don't care about that, right?
I think that Trump should invoke it, right? Because of this danger to federal officers and the fact that so many state governments in both Oregon and in Illinois are allowing these attacks against federal authorities. And I think that we should invoke this, just like it should have been invoked under the Chaz Zone, just like it should have been invoked under Black Lives Matter, because these lefties can't help but be violent. Nonetheless, I think that this little exchange here illustrates the fact that you think that I was leaving because you're prepared is laughable. Now, you might think that you might think, I don't think by any means that you've done embarrassingly bad, but the idea that I heard you and was like, Ryan's lied a little about the Insurrection Act. Like, Ryan, you know enough about me. I want you to be honest with yourself and for everyone for a minute. Do you really think I'm afraid to debate you? For real? After all the interactions
Apparently not. I mean, you're doing it right now. I'm glad you are too, you know. I said that at one point in time. I've gone back and forth. I've thought a lot about this, you know. I've spent a few days thinking about it. And ultimately, I do think that you were look, I was frustrated when I came back because I spent 10 minutes behind while listening to you and Dusty go back and forth. And I didn't think, look, Dusty, he did read it for the first time that day. I did not. Okay. And I was frustrated also because the very first thing you said in that debate was a lie, or at least, you were mistaken in hearing my opening statement. Because I very clearly, and I went back and checked the transcript and then I watched the clip. I very clearly say that the invoking the Insurrection Act is the one time that posse comitatus is the exception to posse comitatus, which would then have the military enforcing the laws on U.S. civilians. And you kept accusing me. You did it multiple times, right at the beginning of the debate, and then when we were going back, when it was getting heated, we were going back and forth. You accused me of saying that it was that I said the only time that the feds can enforce the law, which is obviously a ridiculous thing that I would never say.
Okay,
so
well maybe I may have been wrong about that. I will say I have it written right here. I will admit this, and this is no excuse, but you can't see these fucking lights, but it's there.
I can't.
The very first line.
I believe it was.
See, it says Fed enforce. You see, that's This is not an excuse, and I'm not using it as an excuse, but I normally try to listen diligently and keep notes, particularly in the opening statement. I thought that's what you said, but my son was in the room playing with the dinosaur toy, and my dog was running around. So if we would have went back, it wasn't a big point. It was, you made the point, you were like, well, you know, you don't know about this. And I said, I'm the only person who's read from it in this debate, the Insurrection Act. And
well, I never said you don't know. I said Trippy. And with Peace and Love, Trippy, I don't think you did a lot of research for that topic.
I wasn't able to, man. I was like taking.
I understand. Yeah, I know you had a lot of stuff to deal with.
But
And
you're
I
right.
I was
just let
frustrated
it
when
be moved on.
Rob was like, "Oh, well, you'll get to have your 10 minutes," and I was like, "With fucking Trippy, like Trippy doesn't know it." That was what I said there.
It could have
Right? I was
been.
like, "He doesn't even know about the Insurrection Act again," which for whatever, like for good reasons or bad reasons, like I understand. But like, so I was frustrated that I was going to have to do a 10-minute. I was willing to do 10-minute back and forth. And when you came back, I was ready to do the times, right? And if you go back and actually listen to what I said, there are some people saying that I started talking about January 6th and stuff. That's not true. The January 6th conversation came up way later.
That was way
and
later.
that,
than
like
the,
right after your ShamWow commercial, I specifically pointed out the implications of the Insurrection Act. I talk about the reasons and the symmetry breakers between now and then.
All right. So here's the last thing I'll say about it, right? The reason when Toasted was asking me, come back, I was going to say no. Except then my man Jake Rattlesnake raided me, and we'd just done an extravaganza, and we might have the ShamWow guy on. I can't go back at that point. The joke that I had where you're like, good, I'm glad you're quiet. I have more time to talk. That's it. Once you're going to run the joke that's like, fine, then Ryan, take all the time you need. I can't come back 40 minutes later, but I was like, well, this would be a funny time for a joke. So I came back and was like, yeah, you're right. Ryan's the best debater ever. I have nothing to say. So, but if I am given this 2 minutes, let me do a commercial for ShamWow. That was it. Now, is it a smart ass trolly thing to do? Yeah, it is. But will you admit, Ryan, will you admit that you were talking over me in a frustrating way that led to me saying that?
Yeah, and I think we both were. To be completely fair, I think both of us were talking over each other in that exchange. And I think I was talking over you more. But I think we both were talking over each other.
Well, I was talking over you like I just did there. Like I say something like, yes, but, and then I let you keep finishing. You were talking over me, and I don't know. I don't know if this is true or what it is about your mic, but you sound like this when you're talking over me, and it's like I could barely hear myself thinking. It's like, no, you're just fucking wrong. You're a crybaby, and you're just, and blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, okay, but anyways, I think you're wrong about that because and that's what you would say because you're a baby and you don't have proof of that. And it's like after that, and I deal with this all the time on the panels, and I was like, yeah, I don't know how to deal with it. I'm honest. Like, I'm a pretty good debater, but that's one thing I'm not used to. It's constantly seems to be like the thing. Ever since my last debate with Destiny, that's been the trope. People just yell over me the whole time, and so I figured, okay, fuck all this. But I will say this, like, first, let me say, I do gotta go. I got a show to do myself. Trippy, I am sorry. I'll reach out to you. We'll get something done. Ryan, the way that it fell out is as follows. I'm so sorry, but I just don't want to interact with you for the foreseeable future. And I think that you'll realize in about a month's time or so what a fucking huge mistake that is. That's all I have to say about it. I don't know what to say.
You're the one declaring you're going to do it. How's that my mistake? You're the one just saying you don't want to talk anymore. I mean, that's fine. Like,
because I think
whatever, live your life, dude.
Because
but
I think that the spurting out and how I put it and the talking over is going to be a mistake. That's how it ended up. We'll see. Now, I'm not saying that sometime in the future, 6 months from now, I won't change my mind. But at this point, I think you're starting to get a reputation for being someone who does that a lot to a lot of people. And I'm tired of dealing with debates with people like that. I think it's a shame because unlike a lot of people, I think you can formulate arguments and I enjoy that. But it's not worth my time if it's just going to be Spurgfest. So at this point, I'm not interested. And I think it's going to be a mistake for you. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but you acknowledge that didn't happen tonight, right?
No, it did not. I completely acknowledge tonight has been a better exchange.
Yeah. Have a good one, Rob. It's been a pleasure.
Speak easy, Trippy. Thank you guys so much. I always appreciate it.